Okay, so this is a video for anyone who's struggling with P3, P4 Tesco's. I'm going to talk pretty quickly, but this is a video. If you don't hear me, or if you need to type something up, stop it. I anticipate that anyone using this video might listen to maybe a 15-20 second clip, stop it, do some work, then come back to it. I'm not expecting you to listen to it all and try and take notes all the way through, although I would suggest that the first time of listening, listen to it all, and then you've got an idea for the whole picture, the big picture that you're aiming for, and then you can start to listen to it in little chunky parts, the bits that are most relevant for you and that will help you. So, starting with our checklist. I've described the term organisational structure and I've applied it to Tesco's. What type of organisational structure is Tesco's? Get into the shared area, open up the Tesco's organisational structure, the ones we've been talking about, flat, tall. Which one is this? Explain why you think it's that. Next, you need to talk about span of controls. This is where you can be really accurate. We're talking about Dave Lewis, head of the company. He's part of the executive committee. Count the executive committee. How many people is he responsible for? That's his span of control. But you could also find out how many people Tesco's employ across the entire world, because Dave Lewis is responsible for every single one of them that you can add into your work. Then levels of hierarchy. Let's just check that, count them from the bottom to the top. That's your levels of hierarchy. Lines of communication. Depending on what kind of structure you've said that it is, there will be advantages and disadvantages, and the lines of communication will, for different types of structure, there will be different advantages and different disadvantages. It is likely that you've probably spoken about Tesco's as a tall structure. If you have, then the big advantages for tall structures are everyone knows who they are responsible to. Therefore, the lines of communication, how information moves up and down, is very clear because everyone knows who their boss is. However, with lots of levels of hierarchy, information can be very slow to get from the bottom to the top, or vice versa. Next thing, you should be talking about functional areas. So once you've described what a functional area is, you should be saying that Tesco's has got some traditional functional areas, such as finance, Chief Financial Officer Alan Stewart, people or human resources with Alison, customer services with Rob and Terrell. You can then have a look at the organisational chart. Can you see store manager, security manager, customer services, stock control, personnel? These are all very traditional functional area titles. However, because Tesco's is a store, within the store they will break themselves up very differently. And if you look at this section, the fresh and the non-food, that gives you a really clear indication as to how Tesco's is separating itself. What other kind of functional areas make Tesco's or allow Tesco's to run successfully. So once you've explained that, then you have looked at all the stuff about functional areas, and then you've got to describe the relationship between Dave Lewis, John Allen and the board. So Dave Lewis is the CEO Chief Executive Officer here. He reports to the board, okay, which is run by John Allen, but he's also on the board. If you want to know what the relationship is between the board and Chief Executive, if you read this, that should really give you a good idea. And this is Board of Directors and Executive Committee, again in the shared area. Where are we next? So, checklist. Always come back to the checklist. So we've spoken about the relationship and how they make decisions, basically with regards to Dave having to go to the board, just like in school, and say, can I do this? These are my big ideas. These are my big plans. These are my visions for the next 12 months, 5 years. The board will say yes, but what he does on a day-to-day basis to achieve those aims will be up to him and the rest of the executive committee. Then you've got to talk about cascading objectives. Now remember, if we look on Tesco's PLC, we can find out that the objectives for Tesco's, or its mission and aims, are reported here in our core purpose and values. So the kinds of things that they are trying to achieve are no one trying harder for the customers, treating people how they want to be treated, and using their scale for good. You need to have a bit of a read of these to get your head around what they mean. But let's have a think about trying to put one of these in practice. So The checklist asks you to talk about cascading objectives, covered quite well in the textbook, and then using 2 of Tesco's actual aims, describe where they start and how they might cascade down. You've got to use people's names. So if we have a look at one of the objectives first, no one tries harder for customers. We've already said that the person responsible for making the decisions is going to be Dave Lewis. Dave Lewis then goes to see the board, and then the board say, yeah, fine, we're happy that no one tries harder for customers, but it's not Dave that's trying hard for customers. Dave passes that on to Robin Tiddle, who's our customer services manager or customers officer, and he might also be working with Matt, who's in charge of all the stores within the UK and the Republic of Ireland. Now they, if we look at the organisational chart, will start to cascade that objective down through operations, store, regional managers, store managers, etc, etc. So, but what objective would the store manager give the fresh assistant? Would they turn around to the fresh assistant and say, look, you know, no one tries harder for our customers, make sure that that happens? Or would they actually say to their staff, look, what we need you to make sure of is on your aisle, on your stall, whatever it may be, you're part of the store, can you make sure that you respond to customer needs? Okay? If they ask you where something is, show them, take them. So there'll be different, slightly different objectives, but if every aisle or every delicatessen to butcher's counter in every Tesco store is all doing that, then ultimately no one will be trying harder for its customers, and Dave will be able to say that Tesco's has met that objective. However, if there's a problem with that objective, say people are struggling to deal with customers, then that will start to go back up the organisational chart again, and you need to describe how that will happen. And it will ultimately get to get back up to this group, and they'll be meeting 3 or 4 times a week, and they will discuss, right, we've got a problem, we want to be making sure that no one tries harder for customers, but there's a real problem with our store assistants in that they haven't had great training. So they might come to Alison and say, look, you're in charge of training, can you make that happen? And Alison will say, yeah, so fine, I'll put some new training in place, and then that will go back down the organisational chart, all the way back down to the assistants. If there's a problem, it goes back up again. And this is what you need to get. You need to pick one of those objectives, and you can use the one I've just described there, and you talk about how that happens, and you use people's names. If you want some advice on the second one that I would probably pick, I'd probably be thinking about just having a look now. You could go with working as a team. Okay, so they want people to work as a team. Think about, again, very similar, who came up with the objective, who did he have to run it past, then who would he give that responsibility to, who's responsible for looking after people within the organisation, who's the human resource manager. Then have a look down here, we've got another human resource personnel manager there. They're responsible for making sure that within store there's some training. Maybe if the objective is work as a team, maybe the person within store might organise a night out. Maybe the person in store might do some team building, some team bonding exercises at the end of each day. Maybe the person within store might move teams around so people get to know people a little bit better. There's lots of things that they could do to try and encourage people to work as part of a team. If there's any problems, again, it goes all the way back up until it reaches the chief executives group, and they're meeting a few times a week, and they'll say, right, are we achieving it, or are we having problems? If we're having problems, how could we try and fix those problems? Once you've described 2 of your objectives, then that's this piece of work done. Okay? Best of luck.